Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. I have a salary breakdown for you guys for the 2020 Masters. And in this video, what that will cover is looking at every salary within the top 10 dating back to 2015, doing obviously an analysis and breakdown of how often we see particular salaries any given year, as well as grouping them into ranges to basically give you an idea of which salaries you should be targeting. Because believe it or not, when it comes to lineup construction on DraftKings, you have to consider salary. And this should provide a better idea of basically what salaries end up doing better than others. And I understand salaries don't play golf tournaments, but we can get an edge when it comes to creating lineups just by considering golfers within these salary ranges and either beefing them up or, bringing them down on whether or not you want to play them. So let's go ahead and look at the spreadsheet. I should also mention when we look at this, we will also, after looking at the historical salaries here, we'll look at the 2020 salaries and try to find our best plays. What you can see on the screen, obviously all the salaries dating back to 2015 inside the top 10. And I have them broken up by top 5 and the rest of the top 10. So if you're wondering why that looks silly on the screen, that's how it is. And it's why I have it this way is essentially for formula use when it comes to, spreadsheeting. So that is the only reason that it's why it's split out like this. And I should say, if you want, obviously pause the screen and pause the video and screenshot what you see on screen if you want to use this for future use. Looking at all those salaries, I do a count of top 10 and top 5 of every salary. And what we see the most inside the top 10 are 7,400 and 7,700. Now, when we do these counts, or when I do these counts, I'm not really trying to target 7,400 when it comes to creating lineups. But obviously, if there's a golfer that I like at 7,400, I might start there and pivot off of that. But I'm also looking kind of at ranges. So 7,400, in my opinion, is either your mid 7 or your low 7. And obviously, 7,700 is either mid 7 or high 7. Depending on how you want to break down each salary range is up to you, but that's how I would look at it. And when I look at the rest of the counts, I would also group, the other salaries we would either classify as low 7, high 7, mid 7, that kind of thing. But going down from 7,400 and 7,700, we see, a slew of salaries that have a count of 2. So that would be 10,500, 9,900, 97, 91, 82, 78, 73, 7K, and 6,800. Those salaries all show up twice over the last 5 years inside the top 10. And then obviously when we go down from there, I forgot, Rory was 14,900, and we'll talk about this very shortly, in 2015. That's why that shows up here. But obviously when we scroll down here, we can see a bunch of golfers here 10K and above, or I should say a bunch of salaries 10K and above, that show up once. And there are 11 to be exact. That tells me that that averages out to be at least 2 salaries that are over 10K every year. Now, it's not saying that it happens every year, but it's averaging 2, which is usually not a good idea. Like, if you're trying to create lineups that have 2 golfers over 10, it's going to be really difficult to create, or to have 2 golfers, high 7, low 7. And then also maybe someone 9 or 8K, which we'll get to a little bit here. But you can see the rest of the salaries. We don't see a lot of 6K golfers inside the top 10. You can see there's 4 salaries here in the 6K range that do show up in the top 10, and then the only other one would be 6,800 that shows up twice. So we see a total count of 6. And I suppose I should count how many actual salaries there are. That is one thing I didn't even think about doing. Let's go ahead and do that right now, just so you guys can kind of get a good idea of the statistics behind it. So out of 57 golfers, or 57 salaries, we only see 6 inside the 6K range. So obviously you can see that in this, in these 2 columns here. But I also do a count in the top 5, salaries inside the top 5. And again, you see 7,700 and 7,400 at the top there. Everything else, minus 9,900, drops to just a count of 1 inside the top 5. So basically, these are your 3 salaries that we see quite a bit inside the top, the top 5 and top 10. I should actually rephrase that. It shouldn't be quite a bit. We just see them more than other salaries. Which, if you wanted to start your lineups with someone in the high 9s, high 7s, and low 7s, that's a pretty good way to start lineups. I'm not saying that's going to be unique, but obviously if you have the thought process to start lineups that way, it might be fairly beneficial. I go over here and basically put down a lot of data. I do an average, a minimum, a maximum. I count by range. So obviously you can see the count here and what that percentage is in the whole, in that 57 man or salary field that you want to call inside the top 10. You can see they all show up right there. Should make sure that's 57. Yeah, that's 57. So average salary is 88,000. Well, not 88,000. 8,816. Now, DraftKings only allows 8,300 as your average salary, which means when it's over 8,300, there are several higher salaries that we just wouldn't be able to play. That's essentially what that means. And a good example would be in 2019, where if your first place guy was 10-5, your second place guy was 11-3. Actually, there was a tie, a 3-way tie for second, 11-3, 9-5, and 8-5. If we were to go to 2019 and look at the salaries, you can see Dustin Johnson was our 11-3 golfer. And the little black tick mark here is your optimal lineup, and the ones that are highlighted in blue are the Millie Maker winning lineup. Dustin Johnson was not a part of either of those 2 lineups. And in fact, the Millie Maker didn't even have the winner at 10-5. He went with an extremely balanced approach. He used 49,900 of his salary, and his highest price guy was $9,500. So obviously, I think going kind of with a balanced approach is the way to do it at the Masters, especially when you see all of the salaries that we just kind of went over. I will have to admit the optimal lineup did have the 10K golfer in it. In my opinion, I think the best strategy is to go 10-5 or just somewhere in the 10 and then drop to 9 and then obviously drop to your 8s and your 7s. I think that's the best way to create lineups at the Masters. But let's go ahead and continue our breakdown. Now, this 8,800 average includes Rory's 2015 salary of 14,900. Now, DraftKings, I think in 2016 and 2015, we're still trying to figure out their formulas on how to create salaries, because since 2016, we really haven't seen anybody, except for the Tour Championship, but we haven't seen anybody really over 12K. At most, we see 12.5, maybe sometimes 12.3. But certainly not 14,900. And to piggyback off that also, in 2016 and 2015, there were a lot of golfers that were 5K, like in the 5K range. We no longer see that. 6K is usually the minimum nowadays. So obviously, we don't see anything less than 6K, and we don't see anything over 12K. Not much. Where I actually want to remove that because that kind of skews the stats a little bit. But okay, so I just want to show it to you guys, and then I'm gonna bring it back. But it drops the average salary to 87, so it goes from 8,800 to 8,700. It doesn't really change much. Not much of the fact that we have a pretty expensive. Oops. There we go. We have an expensive field, usually at the Masters, inside the top 10, that is. So you can see the different ranges here, 10K and above, and all of these stats that are from left to right. What I can tell you guys, this is the count, this is the percentage. Again, I kind of already went over this, of everyone inside the top 10. So 22% of top 10 salaries belong in the 10K or above, which is pretty high. And then I have this over here, which how this reads is 4 out of 5 years we've seen 10K or above inside the top 5. I only did top 5 because I think it's important. I think we've seen all these salaries inside the top 10 at least once. Or I shouldn't say at least once, but once a year. So obviously I wanted to kind of break it down a little bit more. So obviously I used top 5. 4 to 5 years, 10K or above. 4 to 5 years, 9K to 10K. 5 out of 5 years, 8 to 9K. 4 out of 5 years, 7 to 8. And below 7K, we see 1 out of 5. So again, piggybacking off what I said earlier, using or creating your lineups with 6K golfers is really not, it's just showing up to not be a beneficial thing. The more of the balanced approach is optimal here. I personally feel more confident when I see a range in consecutive years, like 5 out of 5. That is very compelling to me. So obviously, Chad Eckert peppering the 8K range is a fantastic and viable strategy at the Masters, and especially this year. I go a little bit further. I look at average salary of the winning salary every year. So this is looking at every year, 10-5, 7-7, 8-3, so on and so forth. Your average salary is $9,200. I don't think that this is that valuable to see the average. I do think it's valuable seeing the minimum and the maximum. And then also looking at the ranges of where these golfers finish. I shouldn't say finish, but of where their salaries are for the winners. So obviously 10K and above we see twice. 8 to 9 we see twice. 7 to 8 we've seen once. We've seen nobody inside that 9 to 10K range win this tournament. I'm not saying that can't happen, but obviously the percentages are lower. And it kind of piggybacks, well, I do think finding someone in the 9K range is going to be beneficial. I do think you need someone in the 9K range in order to create the optimal lineup. Despite seeing no winners, maybe this is the year. But either way, I'm not too concerned about it. So let's go ahead and look at the 2020 salaries and use the information that we just went over. So the first thing I want to talk about, let's find someone in the 7-4 and 7-7 inside those ranges, to try to find, golfers that, might be worth a play. Let's go ahead and scroll down. So I don't have the Houston Open stats in here yet, which I will get to as soon as the event concludes. But when we look at the 7K range, we don't have a lot of golfers inside the 7K range. In fact, we see 19 total golfers inside the 7K range. First and foremost, I want to look at the high-priced 7K golfers and try to find one of my favorite plays. But to try to find that, I want to look at every 7K golfer every single year, just to see what their stats were heading into the tournament and see if I can kind of find, a trend to go with it. So we can see 7,400 Webb Simpson and 7,700 Patrick Cantlay. Webb had a 20th the year before. Cantlay had missed the cut. And then you can see what their recent form averages were heading into the tournament. Obviously, that's over the last 7 weeks, what their average finishing position was. So keeping that in mind, when I go through the rest of these, we can see Patrick Reed was 7,700 and had missed the cut the year before with a recent form of 43.20. Again, compare that with Patrick Cantlay, pretty close. And let's just stay on that route because Charles Schwartzel was 7,900 in 2017, missed cut 43 average. In 2016, JB Holmes, I mean, he was 7,400, but a missed cut in this 27 recent form average. 2015, looking at this, don't really see anyone missed cut, and I don't have complete stats, just hard to find. But our 7,300 golfer was Paul Casey, and I know we're looking 74, 77, but Paul Casey kind of qualifies for the 73, as obviously, or 74, as does Ian Poulter. But I guess we don't really see that missed cut and 40 range. We do with Zach Johnson, so maybe we can include Zach Johnson in the 7K range. Going to 2014, we don't have salaries for. So coming back to 2020, really, if I'm looking at the 7K range, trying to find a missed cut and that kind of, salary or recent form, do I include Danny Willett on this? This is going to get worse because he just withdrew. So obviously Danny Willett would not be included. But I guess my two golfers that follow that missed cut, and recent form, similar average, is Justin Rose and Shane Lowry. And obviously Justin Rose is the thumbnail of this video. I like Justin Rose. I think I'm actually going to start a lot of my lineups. He's in my core of for this year, for this year's Masters. Now, the other thing I want to bring up too is not only did we, the miscut, but how about those that finished top 20 the year before? So we see that with Webb Simpson, his recent form average 44. But if we continue going through and we're looking at our 7K golfers, trying to find, a top 10, or I should say a top 20, with that like 24 recent average and obviously the price tag, we can see Henley 15th. He was in the GPP winning lineup. 2017, Paul Casey 7,800 with a top 20 and that 26 to 0.275. We see Paul Casey again 7,700. He was 6th the year before, 24.50. In 2015, we see Ian Poulter at 7,400, finished top 20 and had that 24.25. So coming back to 2020, where can we see that? We want to find a top 20 with like a 24 or like a 20 to 40 range. We really don't see it. I mean, Matt Kuchar, really close. That doesn't cut it for me. Phil does not cut it for me. Matthew Fitzpatrick is really close. Like, these are flip-flopped. So Matthew Fitzpatrick might not be a terrible play following that logic. And maybe Ian Poulter. But we really don't have, that exact trend. I think a top 20 in the 7K range is basically what we need to go with. And you have Phil, you have Matt Kuchar, and Ian Poulter. Those are your three golfers that have a top 20. So when it comes to 7K, perhaps we go Justin Rose as well as maybe Matt Kuchar. If we were to start something like this, we could obviously pivot from Justin Rose to Matthew Fitzpatrick or Phil. We can pivot from Matt Kuchar to Shane Lowry or Ian Poulter, which I think are fantastic pivots if we were doing something with the 7K. I didn't so much look at everyone in the 9K or 10K. I think those are just convictions that you want to play. I will say most of them have top 20 finishes. So if we're looking for golfers inside or 9K and above, and maybe, I don't know, let's go over this really quick. I honestly haven't done this. Ricky Fowler, Jordan Spieth, Rory McIlroy, all top 20s. Justin Rose, Rory once again, Jordan down here on the 11th, very close to top 10. Jordan, Dustin, Hideki. So having a 9K and above might be beneficial to go with essentially either a top 20 or a missed cut. I mean, that's a lot of what I'm seeing for top 10 and above, which is pretty fantastic. You know, we're not seeing any other salaries really outside of that. Or not play. So missed cut, top 20, or did not play. So if we're looking at these up here, you know, I guess maybe I fade Bryson based off of that, and I fade Rory. Just go with these guys. I don't know. It's worthwhile. So, you know, looking at salaries, we kind of went over the favorite plays. I'm not really going to go over the 10K and above. I think that's just more of a conviction play for you guys. But I strongly like going a more balanced approach, and really the two golfers that I did name that you can pivot off of, Justin Rose and Shane Lowry. Actually, I should go Justin Rose and Matt Kuchar, and pivoting off from there. But yeah, that's going to conclude this video. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for a spreadsheet video later today, and then tomorrow we'll look at bucket system and course fit. All right, thanks. Bye.